I request our special guest, Shri Sunil K. Chaturvedi, Chief Executive Officer, Automotive Skills Development Council, ASDC, to present his address on skills. Welcome him with a big round of applause.
Good morning. Actually, I was not supposed to deliver any address as is being introduced. This session, as I was told, was supposed to be on skills in higher learning, which I was supposed to moderate. And as you know, the moderation is so much easier than speaking. So I really don't know, but I have been pitchforked into this situation. I'll do my best for the next 4 or 5 minutes. Of course, I do have few thoughts on skilling in higher education, which I think is the need of the times. In fact, it has been need of the times for past 50 years. But each decade passes and we keep saying that this is the need of the time. But my feeling is that India is on the cusp of socio-economic change of orbit, in my opinion, which from a medium-sized economy, which is moderate in quality and productivity, is on the cusp of going to the next orbit, which is much higher economic value addition based on a decidedly higher levels of productivity and quality in our goods and services. So from a modest, globally speaking, modest volumes of economic activity, which are defined by a moderate level of quality and productivity. Our products and services are really, from global standards, still modest in terms of quality. They are not poor, but they are not the best. Similarly, our volumes are not the largest in the world. Even countries like, not just the developed nations, but many of the emerging nations are clocking much higher level of economic activity. Now, this bridge from moderate levels to higher levels is, if there is one single biggest factor which contributes or enables that, it is skilled people all across the value chain of the economic activity, but more so in the higher learning, in my opinion. Consider this situation. People go to engineering schools, colleges, management colleges, which is almost what I call a social obsession in our country. Even in the villages and the hinterland of our country today, if you go and ask any of the parents, they would be very happy that if their son or daughter became a IT engineer or whatever. But they are not happy to see him or her becoming a high quality plumber or a high quality service technician or a high quality technician for media related devices or whatever you have. And yet that's the demand of the day. But what does that have to do with higher learning? I believe that once the economic activity goes into the next plane or next orbit, product development becomes the key driver. Today, most of the products and services in our country are what is called reverse engineered, which means somebody has developed that product or that service in the world somewhere else. We essentially either take up technology from there, pay for that, or collaborate, but essentially do what we call indigenization of that, adopt it in some cases, but there is no product development. There are exceptions, of course, and I believe that our industry, from where I come, that is the automotive industry, is one of the exceptions, that we do have a lot of product development, but compared to the situation globally and the opportunities, is still very, very minimal. So if we have to go to the higher orbit of activity, as I mentioned earlier, product development becomes a necessity. There has been such a revolution of IT, and this is Digital India, so we must talk of that also. There is such a revolution we have seen in the last 10, 15 years of IT. But come to think of it, these are services, by and large, almost entirely services. And even within services, they are the lowest range of services. So that's why you hear terms like cyber coolies, people who go and start working in the IT industry. A whole bulk of them are called cyber coolies. I don't like that expression, but it's a fact. Now, why is that? Because there is hardly any product development or innovation happening, even in IT sphere. So therein lies the opportunity. India itself is such a huge market, and with the passing of GST, economic unification has just been ushered in my opinion. It will throw up large opportunities. Now, to drive that, essentially you need to have skills in higher education. We keep talking about our MBAs, engineers. Hardly, employability is so low. People who pass engineering, not more than, although there are claims of individual organizations that we have 60%, 70%. Now again, by the way, placement does not have to be linked with employability. Companies, they have to hire, they will hire whoever is available. So people say that our 60% people got placed. That doesn't mean that 60% of them are employable. If you talk to industry who hire them, they routinely say that we hired whatever is available and now we will start training them. You look at places like Infosys, Wipro, all these IT companies, they had a lot of money and resources, so they created universities of their own. Mysore University of Infosys, that campus is celebrated. What they do is hire tens of thousands of people every year, not for their engineering skills, but essentially for some communication, some arithmetic, some logic, and then 2 years they put them in that campus. The real engineering education, so it becomes 4+2, if you ask me. Essentially, that 2 years which they spent there should have been part of those 4 years. And what's missing is that the education part is so terribly delinked to industry's needs, and that's the need of the hour. And the way to do is, again, nothing new. Skills happen only when you have integration with actual live, practical, on the shop floor, on the services floors of the industries. So I'll just not elaborate any further on this. I thought, it will be important to convey this idea that our academia in our higher learning should essentially keep the academics out of that. There's too much of academics there. Try and fill it a little bit with skills, which essentially means the requirement of industry, which actually means working on live projects during their 4 years of working or 3 years or 2 years of MBA. And once that happens, you will see employability go up, and that employability actually relates directly to higher productivity, higher quality, which actually is the only thing which adds to value creation, and therefore higher standards of living is a result thereafter. I will not take any more time. Thanks very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shri Chaturvedi, for this special address. Now, I am inviting a person who has a vast experience in industry. He is alumni of Indian Institute of Management and has been advisor to industry education. He belongs to Adobe, the company which is global leader in digital transformation technologies, $6 billion in revenues, and global leader in education, 10,000 plus universities and higher education. Welcome him with a big round of applause, none another, Mr. Supreeth Nagaraju, Head Education West, South India and Sri Lanka, Adobe Systems. Big round of applause. He has a presentation on transforming education in digital age. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Respected academic leaders, peers from industry, and respected panel members and friends. I represent Adobe Education. We are one of the largest verticals within the global Adobe family. Adobe, as you all know, is synonymous to Photoshop and PDFs, as most of you may be using day in and day out. So I'm going to be talking specifically about what is the impact of digital transformation technologies. I'm not going to be specifically talking about skilling and the importance of digital skilling so much in the landscape of the current context of digital age. I'm sure most of you have already discussed, debated about it at large. I'm going to be focusing especially on the fact of execution, the key and the speed at which you need to execute compared to the previous decade in terms of various transformations that you've brought about in processes, be it a school education process, be it a vocational education process, or be it a university as a functioning, or any other educational bodies that you would be looking at. Let me start you with a quick video on what we call as New School. It's an emulation of various sets of research that we have done across the world, across landscapes, both the society as well as the industry, and also an amalgamation of schools, amalgamation of what's happening in the vocational space, amalgamation of what's happening in the university space, and larger impact to the society at large. All right, there seems to be a technical glitch on the voice front though, but it's just a video that's playing here. While we get this fixed, let me take a moment on what are we doing in education specifically out. So, as a global leader in education, we have been focusing heavily on transformation of, can I have lights? Is it too dark here? Some lights, please. Yeah, okay, thanks. All right, so what are we doing in education? Education as a field, specifically from Adobe standpoint, is focusing on digital transformation solutions. As I mentioned, we're looking at 2 to 3 large core areas. One, of course, is skilling area, which I discussed about. Second one is specifically do with various forms of workflow managements and transformation technologies that would address core pain areas from an educational standpoint. And as I mentioned, it's a tough task in terms of transformation. I heard the previous panelists specifically talking about adaptation to various forms of transformation that are happening in the education area. It's a tough one, and this is how it is currently in terms of the current landscape. It's a tough one. Taking a course correction is a very important area, which I would urge each one of you as academic leaders to look at. And digital is one of the core areas that I would, harp upon over the next few minutes. So let's look at what is the pace at which things are changing. As this slide talks about, we will see about 20,000 years of progress in the 21st century, about 1,000 times greater than the 20th century. And that's a startling rate at which the changes are expected to happen. And the next generation, that the Generation Z, is moving at a much faster pace in terms of technology adoption, digital adoption. And it's very quintessential for every single educational institution at all stratas of the education system to be prepared for this. Let me substantiate it with few data points. If you look at this slide, this is the advent of some of the core technologies that have shaped our society, right? 40 years is what it took for our basic technology systems like an electricity or a stove as an adoption in our society. But if you look at the last 10 years, it's just over 10 years that cell phones have been adopted at a much faster pace. Similar to what we have seen in smartphones or even the digital technologies. So which is a proof and point that the next generation is adopting it much faster. Let me give you some more statistics. It took us 35 days. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this game called Angry Birds. Angry Birds took 35 days for a global adoption of more than 1 billion downloads. And the maximum age bracket, the maximum demographic background was 13 to 30. Billion plus population worldwide, 35 days. So what I'm essentially trying to communicate is the fact that today digital wave has already taken over. It's amongst us as we speak right now. And it's important for us to catch up with it and also execute it within the realm of the things that we're currently trying to achieve. Look at the proof and point one of the biggest indexes that anybody would reach out to when they're trying to understand what is the digital penetration, what is the adaptation across various landscapes, not just globally but also in India, is the adoption of smartphones. 2.1 billion is a startling number, right? And let's look at India. What's the Indian scenario? There's no better time than today in India. As of June 2016, there are 462 million internet users, and this is the largest market for smartphone and internet adoption worldwide. I'm sure all of you have read about various initiatives by some of the global MNCs and leaders who are trying to bring in innovation in terms of internet supply into our landscape across the length and breadth of the country, right from Jammu to Kanyakumari to east and west, right? Why is that happening? That's primarily because of the rate at which internet adoption is happening, irrespective of the educational background of individuals. People are willing to forego of their square meal, but they want to have a smartphone in their hand, which is worth 3,000 bucks, right? Now look at the largest digital project that has ever happened in the history of mankind. Aadhaar, 5.3 years, 1 billion plus rollouts. It's a digital revolution in the world, and we need to be proud about it. It's an Indian product done by our own, bunch of citizens, and it's been adopted 5.5 years. There's no country in the world who's done this. If Aadhaar can do this, why can't education do this? And look at the second biggest index that I would bring to everybody's attention here. Usually advertising and marketing is considered as a taboo in education, and I would strongly disagree to that. Because today, unless and until you make yourself available and known to the larger population, you will never be able to get them to adopt it. And it is predicted that by 2020, digital advertising spends is about to touch about 3.8 billion. And let me tell you, today digital advertising is 40% of the traditional advertising spend. 40% is a big jump. We're talking about 3 to 4 years of digital revolution, and within 4 years we have 40% market share in the digital advertising spend across many companies who've been in as part of this. So this is a very important set of statistics that actually would shake the fundamentals in the way in which educational institutions have been engaging with a lot of students, be it in the traditional +2 and also the university space, or an executive education space, or even for the vocational education space as such. Now, what's the Adobe skin in the game here? So we promise, and we have delivered over the last 30 plus years. 35 years is when is our total experience in the digital space, and we've been innovating day in and day out. And we've been in the education space for about 30 years now. In Indian education space, we've been about 8 to 10 years. And our promise to the education fraternity is that we will help you deliver standout digital experiences. Not just deliver digital experience, but we come with a clear-cut outcome-driven initiatives, both in terms of student impact and also in terms of business impact. And we mean business in education. So what is the need of the hour? So the need of the hour today is to ensure that you deliver personalized experiences which is relevant to your respective geographies, to your respective demographies, and it should be real time. There's no point in delivering a curriculum which is probably 8 years old and not even willing to reinvent it or relook it. I'm sure all of us have challenges within the realm of the affairs that we are in, be it government affairs, be it public affairs, or even for that matter, the executional speed at which faculties can adopt these set of new technologies or the curriculums that we are looking at. But we need to figure out a way to do this. And I strongly believe that ICT can help deliver this. And particularly digital technologies have time and again proven this. Some of the proof in points that I shared with you in the previous slides are proof in pudding for these. And some of the Gartner studies also share that at least 30% of the higher education institutions globally, and also in India, I strongly believe that in India, will have a learning analytics strategy to improve student outcomes. It's important for you to raise to the ulterior motive of the individuals. There is no way by which you can have one dress fits all scenario. There is a necessity for customization. There is a necessity for localization. There is a necessity for extremely important aspect, which is democratization of content creation. and delivery to the respective lowest common denominator in your classroom, which is probably missing today. It is not important, not just important to publish journals and research papers, but it is important equally to raise to the ulterior motive of individuals and raise to the lowest common denominator in the classroom. And let me over the next few slides, try to help you understand what all we can do to achieve these set of goals. So the next slide specifically talks about what is today's students' motives. They're all digital natives. They are born with digital devices, digital access, ever since they started schools or before schools for that matter. They're connected, and they want to create and deliver and communicate and collaborate the way they want it. I mean, they also want to learn with the simplest format. They would like to do it. They would like to collaborate and understand various things and also question the status quo of the institutions, the way in which they are taught. And most important, I think I heard a couple of points in the previous panels talking about people are afraid or students are afraid of being entrepreneurial. I completely disagree. I completely disagree with that fact. Let me give you some statistics. I've been part of a few of the panels which do business planning competitions in India by Indian universities and by various industry bodies. We see a flock of Indian students, irrespective of their economic strata, participating in business planning competitions and want not just funding, but also industry support, mentoring. How many of the universities are actually providing this aspect? Please think about it. Important point to ponder about. How many of them are actually encouraging students to experiment? I don't care if you fail, but please try. How many of you are doing that? These are few initiatives that I think I'd like to bring it to your attention. And the desire to be more creative, that's a very important aspect. It's one side of the story is, while you get good marks and score as per the respective, curriculums that have been set across and the evaluation patterns, but at the same time, it's important for you to look at how do you question the status quo and make them think a little more creatively. So what are the areas, students look at and how do they go about this journey? And what is it that, you need to look at from a student experience standpoint, be it in a university system or be it in a school education system? It's important to attract the right mix. Diversity is important. We stress upon diversity in corporate world. The same applies to education as well. It's important to ensure that, you have good mix of students, both from a gender standpoint, both from a geographical standpoint, and also from various strata of interest levels in the industry standpoint, right? So communication to attract students is very, very important. This to a larger extent boils down to an important aspect of digital communications and outreach as a program. We can help you do that. Enrollment, students with ease. Enrollment, students with ease. And, we need to look at how do we look at seamless workflows and integrations. The workflows today are heavily paper-driven. We've heard enough and more about ERP systems being implemented in educational institutions, but how many of them are very seamless and connected across? We can help you do that. Lastly, the important aspect is going to be, it needs to be personalized, it needs to be rich, it needs to be integrated across. In-demand skills, you need to be relevant with respect to the skills that are being taught out. It's not just about IT skills, it's about skills that can, cross-leverage across industry verticals. And last but not the least, how do you look at interaction with external bodies, be it, industry bodies, your alumni, how do you bring their relevant skills and knowledge sharing across to the industry aspect? So Adobe today has been driving all of these specific outcomes across the globe and also in India in terms of achieving various milestones that a student needs and assisting you as a technology partner, both in skilling, documentation workflows and various formats of automation technologies. We have some very relevant solutions from an industry standpoint in India. We've heard enough and more about counterfeiting of marks cards and stuff like that. We are a global leader in security solutions from a documentation standpoint. I can help you, talk more about this offline. We have digital marketing, which is one of the biggest outbursts in the industry today. We are a global leader in digital marketing. We can help you deliver various forms of engagement, social engagements. We can help you do analytics in terms of the way in which people are looking at your university, who's talking good about you on Facebook, who's talking bad about you, what is trending on Twitter, or what is the way in which you can look at optimizing your media spend and stuff like that. So what are the technologies that help you drive these? We are largely one of the first and foremost cloud transformation companies, helping you deliver both content, data, and digital marketing across the platform. We call these as Creative Cloud, Document Cloud, and Marketing Cloud across. And we have various outcome-driven initiatives, again, from a skilling standpoint. We have Adobe Education Exchange, which helps universities and institutions to adopt these technologies, both in terms of technology transfer, also in terms of professional development programs and certifications from an education standpoint. Not just that, we also connect you with the industry. We are one of the largest social media platform, helping students and faculty members to exhibit their talent, connect them with the respective industry stakeholders, look at peer-to-peer collaboration, reviews, even look at entrepreneurial stints, and of course the job side is a part of this as well. So this is a very important slide, more from a documentation standpoint, which I mentioned about. I'm sure all of you are familiar with PDF. PDF is one of the world's largest used software, and now as a PDF engine, we also have e-signature and documentation workflow, which could be of great use from an automation standpoint. Just give a sneak peek on this. Now, a few slides specifically on customers who have adopted this and what are the outcomes that they have driven out of this. Swinburne University in Australia has adopted some of our skilling programs. We have many of these examples. I'm just giving you one or two of them. They have driven digital marketing and digital media as part of their core curriculum, which is now in high demand, not just from an IT standpoint, but also from lots of traditional businesses that have been there. USC Annenberg, they've been focusing on skilling as an initiative, more so from the media angle. Our own Manipal group, in India has been one of our largest customers for digital marketing in the education space. They drive admissions and student outreach from an Indian market standpoint for students as well as for faculty outreach. Last but not the least, one of the largest universities in the US, Philadelphia University, has been using our digital document management solution and e-signatures, more so from automating and also from security documentation standpoint. So that's pretty much about it from my end. Thank you so much for your time. If there are any questions I'd like to take on the go, or I'm around for the day, we can have these discussions. Yeah. Yes.
We were discussing about in the previous session can be improved by way of providing this channel. I talked about, I think, 6 channels that I had provided in the curriculum in the 2 revisions I had done in 2 universities. In the latest institution, I had provided 6 channels. 2 of the channels I talked about. Yeah. The 3rd channel is the student mentoring. Yeah. Student mentoring actually can address a lot of issues. One is you see a lot of dropouts occurring in professional education. After a year or 2, they just drop out for various reasons, because of lack of performance, because of lack of support systems, because of lack of understanding, because of disconnect with the institution or the teachers, because there is a separation anxiety, and then there is a peer pressure, a lot of things going on in the student's life. When they are especially in a UG program, they are away from the family. And there is nobody there really interested in them in their success, successful completion of the program, except in the academic part, there may be mechanisms. But individually, they don't look at non-academic matters that impact a student's performance and progress. So this can be addressed through the student mentoring channel. But oftentimes, you find in institutions, student mentoring is provided as a non-academic, non-credit administrative load. So the faculty perceive that as an additional load. And oftentimes they may be expected to get in touch with parents, but there may not be...
I'd like to pause you over there. The word load is very derogative.
It is not derogative, it is called actually load.
With a heavy heart I say that, but I think education as a core area should have mentoring as a part and parcel of the overall, any faculty should carry that. I teach out of passion as well. And then, when you teach, unless and until you're bringing an industry relevance and trying to share your experience and give them, inputs on what they can do, or bring in peers from the industry who can share, or use technology platforms like, I spoke about Behance. Behance, incidentally, we've not done any great marketing in India, but, I'm happy to share that there are close to about 1.5 lakh Indian students who are there on this site, and they are basically getting mentored by various sets of industry, leaders across the planet. And it's important for every institution to look at socializing. It need not necessarily be only through Facebook. There are platforms like Behance. You can create your own social platform. I'm sure each one of you are a legends by yourself. You have more than decades of student and alumni base. Create an atmosphere where one can talk to another. It's just about connecting. It's a community, right?
Informal connection is one thing. Formally helping somebody where there is a kind of a serious interest in the student's progress and student's success in life, not just in the degree. So that can be brought through the mentoring. And the faculty load that I'm referring to, not in a derogative fashion, but it is a standard terminology that is looked at to calculate how many hours a particular faculty is engaged in a formal role, whether it is in a teaching or in an administrative assignment, department level, school level, administrative level, or in research.
Fairly, you can't define this. It brings down to one single point, which I would strongly recommend each one of you. I mean, I could be wrong if somebody has a different opinion. Inspiration. You have to inspire students to look at collaborating, using various sets of connections you have or they do on their own. That is the only way by which you can grow. You cannot expect. Probably, I'm sure each one of you as universities, both in private and public, have at least few 10,000s or few lakhs as your students, right? I mean, you cannot cater to the scale that you are in. But the only way by which you can do it is inspire them to start connecting and start, being connected to the communities who are professionals out there. That is the easiest way by which you can do it.
See, what you're talking about
I think,
actually...
excuse me. I think both have made a very good point. What Prayat Bahara is talking about is the actual reality on the ground.
Yes.
What you are talking of is a desirable utopian situation. I think we should stop at this because you may have individual opinions and spin, use. So there may be some other questions actually to you or anybody.
Yeah, sure.
There is another speaker also. Yes.
Learning outcomes you're talking about is top 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. The education system is right now dealing with first 4 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, or first 3 levels of taxonomy.
We'll take this offline.
The jump has to take on.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other question on this session? Any other question from anybody?
None? Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Supreeth. And now I invite Mr. Nitesh Tyagi from Mahendra Skills Training and Development Private Limited for his presentation. Thank you. Welcome him with a big round of applause.
Good morning, friends. Hi, I am supposed to present you something on skilling and skill scenario in India. But to cut short our presentation, I'll take skill scenario in India plus skilling activities, why candidates in India in skilling, sorry, let me give you, where is my pen drive? Why skill activities in India is not picking up, why a candidate or a learner is not aspire enough to take skill as their career. So basically what I want to say is there are 3 main problems which I think any social inclusion initiative will face, and a solution should come with 3 challenges. First, scalability, because India is a big country. So skill development in India is definitely going to be a challenging task because education cannot fulfill that task. We required 65 million workforce in 1920. Education industry is not capable enough to fulfill this need. Skill development, a parallel initiative apart from education, skill development should be a parallel universe for skilling so that we can develop that resources, because there is a potential chances or potential opportunity for India to become talent pool. we can supply or serve the rest of the world those workful resources. But to do that, we need to have educated, skilled and proficient workforce. Why we are facing this problem? We are facing this problem because India is a huge country. Scalability is the problem, replicability is the problem, robust monitoring is the problem. What I think personally, as far as skill development is concerned. So, in my suggestion, what we can do is there is paradigm shift in social thinking, because in today's generation, skill development is not considered as aspirational for the candidates, with the candidates. So a social paradigm shift is needed so that we can adopt those changes. For example, what growers did in their field, what logistic industries did in last 5 to 6 years, we started respecting that industry now. In the same way, we should do that paradigm shift for the all other sectors and all other skill sets also. Secondly, delivery of training should change. When we think now as a training platform, we think of classrooms. But now it should change to labs, it should change to workshops based. Third, unconventional job roles should introduce. For example, parents also, it is our responsibility as a sector skill council, it is our responsibility as NSDC, it is our responsibilities as associate training providers, that we should educate candidates, not only candidates, but we should educate our parents also, so that they can divert their kids towards some other job roles also. Because whatever we think of medical, we think of engineering, we think of 3 or 4 main streamlines. But if we start respecting other job roles, if we start respecting other sectors, we can divert parents and educate them. Why they are not aspirational? Because they don't have much information. And this is our responsibility to educate them, to give them the path, whatever available path is there. So unconventional job roles we should introduce. Plus, in current education system, though I completely agree that skills cannot change education. We cannot replicate or we cannot change skills from education, because education is paramount. What I personally think, education gives answer to all questions: why, what, when, where. But skills answers only one thing: how. Just explain you clearly. Imagine a scenario of war, where a terrorist and a soldier and a normal civilian. What I understand, a terrorist is skilled. He knows how to shoot. He knows how to operate that weapon. A soldier is skilled and educated, because he knows how to operate the weapon, and he knows how, when, where, what of everything. But a civilian, in other case, is educated but not skilled. He cannot help a soldier to fight in the war. So basically, this is the main difference. So education cannot replace skill, but skill is a subset of education. Without skills, we cannot survive. An individual cannot survive. So basically, we should introduce, in our current education system, we should introduce skill education. It is also important because the dropout rate in India is high. What I think, if I can remember correctly, 300 million children enter in primary education. 55 million remains in secondary education, and only, I think, 15 million pass with higher education. So basically, if we introduce skill education in primary education or education system, we can give them some skills, so that if at all they drop out, they can have some skills to fill their stomach. So basically, I'll conclude with the challenges what we are facing, or skill development initiatives is facing, is scalability in India, because this is a huge country, population is so huge. Replicability, because we don't have a model which we can replicate from ground to upper level, because in sitting in Delhi, we can think of some models, but that same model we cannot replicate in a village. Third and the last is robust monitoring. Ma'am, let me conclude and then we'll take the questions, because we have eminent sector skill council CEOs also with us. So, yeah, sure. So, basically, these are the challenges what we are facing, and the most important challenge is paradigm shift in thinking. We need a change in thinking for skill development. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think you can perhaps start with that question the lady had. Could you repeat that, or did you understand what she was saying? You'll have to repeat, ma'am.
So my question is, when he says that a person, he thinks of an idea probably in Delhi, and it is very difficult to replicate the same idea in a village. But are we still bound by the demographic? Are there any limitations to that effect? I think we are reaching far and wide, and as far as us being not able to replicate, we are into an economy which is increasing and on the rise with the skill-based education. Even the vocational education is quite on the rise. So I really...
exactly. If you're talking about education, I agree. But as far as skill development is concerned, we need proper trainers for skill development. What trainers we find in Delhi, we cannot send them to interiors. Believe me. Corporates is helping us, but this is for corporate, and this should be by the corporates also. So if corporate is setting up the institutes, it is okay. But what I'm talking about, workshop models, we cannot replicate. In fact, corporates cannot replicate that model at every village. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So a model which can be replicable should be there in skill development.
For example, which model? I mean, if it can be specific.
I'll just elaborate on that. I think what he's trying to bring out, your question is valid, because you keep hearing that with the enabler, technology being an enabler, it's so much easy to replicate. That's what essentially your idea is. But the point which is being made here is the difference between education and skilling. E-learning and digitization and all is very easy in today's time for education side, the theoretical side. But the point he was making was that practical part of skilling is all about practical, hands-on. He also gave example of terrorist versus soldier. I think that was a beautiful example, although a little, So the point is, the kind of workshops and the trainers and access to industry, which is available in certain areas, is not easily available in all the hinterland. That's the simple point.
Yes, so we cannot generalize it. Probably the proportion and the ratio varies.
You're right. Any other question on this?
I just like to add to that. I just like to add a case study from Hyderabad. So we have this institute called ICRISAT, right? I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. It's a research organization helping farmers across various parts of India and world. So they use some of our technologies, and to answer your question from an how do you reach contextually to remote corners, and how do you effectively give solutions to various parts? So ICRISAT has been doing various sorts of research, and they do localization of content delivery and training to farmers. And e-learning has been effectively used over there. I mean, they use VideoSat, through some of our Adobe technologies. It's called as Adobe
I'm
Connect.
aware of it. I've been to ICRISAT on many occasions.
So that's a classic example. I mean, if farmers can be trained, I'm sure there are various ways and means by which you can look at a combination of technologies as well. Yes, answer is ICT alone is not an answer. It is a combination of various formats. It is contextual to respective scenarios and industries.
And demographic barriers no longer exist, I feel.
Any other question on this, please? All right. So we end the session by thanking you for your attention and the co-speakers here for sharing their thoughts, both from industry point of view, from skilling point of view, as to what are the challenges and how we can all work together to take it forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Just wait for 1 second, the stage. We have a very experienced and very senior person here, sitting here. So I would like to invite him to present speaker mementos to all the eminent panelists. Welcome him with a huge round of applause, Mr. Dilip Shenoy, Chairman, Board of Management, St. Longal Institute of Engineering and Technology. He will present speaker mementos to Shri Sunil K. Chaturvedi, Chief Executive Officer, Automotive Skills Development Council, ASDC. Mr. Supreeth Nagaraju, Head Education, West South India and Sri Lanka, Adobe Systems. And Mr. Nitesh, Tyagi, Mahendra Skills Training and Development Private Limited. Mr. Shenoy holds a very vast experience in skill development, and he was earlier CEO of NSDC. Request for a group photograph. And since Mr. Shenoy is here, I would invite him to speak a few words on skill development. Sir, few words about the World Education Summit and skill development. Thank you very much.